I used to do a lot of volunteer work in search and rescue in my home city. My city was not huge and my primary job was as a firefighter, so it kind of just naturally fit in. Don't get me wrong, the work is harrowing, but if you can toughen up enough, it's really rewarding. For every person we never find or who turns up dead, you always have a parent who is eternally grateful you managed to find their lost child. This story that I'm about to tell you, it happened to me in my younger days. I am long since retired now, and my body can't really keep up anymore. You get sent out on all kinds of calls, and unfortunately, you do get used to finding bodies in bad places. I've seen everything from people dead from hypothermia, from exposure. I've seen bodies mauled to death by bears. I've seen hikers who have dropped dead from exhaustion, or who have taken one wrong step and ended up at the bottom of a steep drop, completely mangled by the fall. This call is one of the most disturbing ones I have ever been involved in my entire time volunteering. It's something that I still don't really understand to this day. This happened around mid-January time, so it was pretty cold outside. The only people doing anything around this time were experienced hikers who were prepared for the weather. Apparently, 5 experienced backcountry hikers had not turned up. They had failed to exit a remote basin after a 4-day winter loop. Their last check-in with their family was normal and on time, but just nothing after that. Weather reports showed no major storm systems moving through during their planned window. There were no avalanche warnings active for that zone either. When 5 competent adults disappear in stable conditions, you kind of just assume the worst, especially people experienced like them. You assume it's something like injuries preventing them from completing their journey, at the very least. Well, what I saw was well beyond what we expected. We staged at the trailhead before dawn, and began a grid ascent with 2 teams leapfrogging along the ridgeline and drainage. By late afternoon of the second day, we located their campsite in a shallow depression surrounded by pine. The tents were still standing, but they were cut open from the inside. There were these long straight slashes going through the nylon at around shoulder height or so. Their sleeping bags had been dragged out into the snow and had frozen stiff. There was still some gear abandoned in the tent. Some boots and some heavy socks, which meant that one of the occupants either had spares, which is probably unlikely for such a short journey, or had stepped out of the tent barefoot. I mean, it was very possible for them to have extra gear, but for such a short hike, extra gear like that would be considered unnecessary and just weigh you down, again, especially for someone as experienced as these people were. One of the tents in the camp had just completely collapsed inward. It looked as if someone or something heavy had fallen onto the top of the tent and just squished it. We could not find any kind of animal tracks around the perimeter of the camp to suggest that they were attacked. We could not see any signs of a struggle or a fight. It seemed that they had just vanished after some unknown destruction. At this point, we were told to expand the search radius from the campsite. We were to split up into teams and spread out wide in order to cover a larger area and hopefully run across something while combing the area. It only took about 200 yards or so of walking before my team came across the first body of one of the hikers. This body was at the bottom of a downslope near a stand of narrow trees. The body was upright. It was kneeling down, just resting on its knees. The body seemed to be facing towards the trunk of a pine tree, and the forehead of the body was resting lightly against the bark of the tree. That's what was keeping him upright. The body, it was horrible. The spine was bent backward in a sort of smooth arc. It looked as if the spine had been ripped through the skin and pulled at until it curved at a higher angle. But there were not any signs of cuts or bites in the skin. It looked as if the skin had literally just fallen open or given way to pressure. I'm not really sure. The arms of the dead man were just hung at his sides. The shoulders, though, they were rotated way too far forward and the joints were clearly displaced. The worst part, I think, is that there was no blood at all on the snow, aside from the back of the jacket and other layers where the spine had been visible. There were no other bits of damage to the clothes. There were no other marks in the snow, aside from those that looked to be left by the dead man. There was not a second set of prints or anything. There was just nothing, aside from some kind of compression. Just like this round spherical imprint that looked to be heavy, maybe 6 feet in diameter. Just this big, random circle. I remember his hands too. This is a detail that makes me feel uneasy, and like it was obvious someone had done this deliberately, because each and every single one of his fingers was bent backward evenly at the knuckle. They were all just bent until snap, and then just left there. It was no accident, and I don't think something that could ever have been achieved by a random animal attack. The second and third hikers were not found by my team, but I heard about them in excruciating detail. They were found within the next half mile away from the camp. They were all messed up just as badly, really violent deaths. Although I'm not sure if these injuries were the cause of death or if they were inflicted after the fact. One hiker was found laying flat on his back with both legs outstretched and just snapped at horrible angles. The other one was found laying on his side in the snow. There were apparently imprints beside his body that made it look like someone had kneeled next to him. His neck was, and I did not see this personally with my own 2 eyes, so don't take my word for it, but his neck was apparently stretched. I was told it looked like someone had grabbed him by the top of the head and pulled as hard as they could until his neck stretched a couple of inches, and after that it was snapped. He had no other kind of defensive wounds or bites or scratches, no tearing consistent with an animal attack. All 3 of those bodies looked as if the hikers had become paralyzed in the position that we had found them in before whoever did what they did to them. None of us knew what was going on, and a lot of rookie volunteers, well, they could not handle it. We had a lot of them just up and leave, a lot of people who could not hold their stomachs that ended up vomiting. I don't blame them. Even for someone who had seen a lot, this was just too much. And the fact that we did not have a clue what happened just made it all the worse. We eventually called for additional personnel to assist with the recovery, and the weather had begun to turn by late afternoon. It wasn't a full storm, but there was a whiteout that greatly reduced visibility. I don't think I could see more than 30 yards in front of me by the time it was at full force. Police had been informed and had come out to the scene, along with medical professionals. I didn't really hear a lot of what they had to say. If I'm being honest, I could not stand to be anywhere near the bodies. I know the bodies got taken away very quickly. Law enforcement was happy for us to keep looking for the remaining missing hikers while they examined all the evidence. We tethered in pairs and continued sweeping outward from the last known position of the 4th body. It was during that sweep that we actually lost one of the volunteers with us somehow. I will just call him Mark for the purposes of the story. He was ahead of me by maybe 20 yards. I remember he was almost right on the edge of my vision. I remember he was calling something in on the radio, but I was struggling to concentrate on his voice, and then just silence all of a sudden. I called his name out immediately, but I got no response. We tried to close the distance as fast as we could, while trying to stay within line of sight of each other, as much as the blowing snow allowed anyway. When I reached the spot where he had last been standing in, the tracks had just stopped, but there was a large imprint in the snow, similar to that big circular imprint that we found near the bodies before. I was really panicking and shouting and screaming, and something grabbed me by the arm. I freaked out, but it was just Mark. It was Mark, but I was not expecting him, so I instinctively slapped him across the face. But he did not even care about that. He was grabbing me by the arm and was dragging me and just kept muttering, "Please, let's go. We need to go. Please, please." He just kept saying this over and over again with almost no breaths taken. He was gripping me so tightly, and I just went along with it because he was clearly spooked. And I could see that his other hand, the one he wasn't using, the fingers, one or two of them, they were snapped backward. I tried to ask him what the hell happened, but he just kept rambling and pulling me along. I think he had too much adrenaline to even notice the pain. I remember at some points, in the direction that Mark had grabbed me from, I kept seeing these shadows right on the edge of my visibility. Something standing upright, around 5 to 6 feet tall, but I could never make out any more details than just that. It was just this pure black figure contrasted against the pure white snow. After a while of walking, I could start to make something out over Mark's rambling. Some kind of movement from someone who was not a volunteer, who was not in our group. I heard these slow and heavy deliberate steps, and then the sharp crack of a tree branch that made Mark squeal and put an end to his muttering. I turned around and tried to scan as best as I could with the limited visibility that I had. About 30 yards away, I could maybe make out a figure again. It was standing in between two pine trees and was standing upright again. It was just completely motionless, and I could not make out any features, but it felt like it was watching us. It looked exactly like a human in the outline, I could swear, except maybe that the arms were just a little bit too long. They hung unnaturally low, and it didn't stand like a person would. It was hunched over, with its neck craned down and forward. Mark screamed when he turned and saw the thing and let go of me, and he just started running for his life. He almost pushed me away, and I almost fell to the ground. The thing, it didn't even give chase. I saw its outline there, completely unmoving until I moved away. But the second Mark saw that thing and started running, it let out this horrible, horrible sound. This roar like that of a big cat. It sounded more like thunder. No way a sound like that could ever come from a person. I just ran and followed along with Mark, and the others followed behind me. My heart was pounding the whole way back, but we eventually made it to safety. As far as I'm aware, the bodies of the remaining hikers were never recovered. I think a criminal investigation was opened up regarding foul play or a possible murder, but no formal charges were ever brought against anyone, as far as I know. I don't even know where you would start looking. I have no idea how those hikers possibly died, or what that thing was that I saw. I do know that Mark stopped volunteering after that day, as did a lot of the rookie volunteers who saw those bodies firsthand. Mark became a bit of a recluse. I'm sad to say he drank himself to death a few years ago. His mom was heartbroken. I think he ended up moving back in with her after he lost his job, and she told me that he was always paranoid. I think in the last few years of his life, he just lost his mind, going on drunken ramblings, talking about seeing things at night, and how everyone was hunting him and trying to kill him. I wish I had more answers for you, but yeah. That's the weirdest thing I ever experienced when volunteering for a search and rescue. I hope you can make more sense of it than I've been able to over the last few years. In the 1980s, there was a derelict hotel near where I lived in East London called the Gallions. It was this terrifying place built in the 1800s with gargoyles on the lot. Look it up. All the kids used to dare each other to go on the third floor and bang on the corrugated iron blocking the windows and run back down in almost total darkness. One day during the school holidays, about 6 of us were over there messing around for hours and had literally searched the whole place with the help of a stolen workman's lamp, the kind with oil and a flame. We found nothing. The place was empty and was trashed after being vandalized for decades. My younger brother, who was 13 years old, joined us later in the day and had never been inside, so me and my friend took him in to go to the dreaded third floor. The only way in was through the cellar, which let in daylight, and once you got to the ground floor, it was totally dark. I suggested that we sit on the stairs for a minute to let our eyes get used to the dark, as the oil lamps barely gave an orange glow. As we sat there, we heard footsteps coming down the winding wooden stairs from the floor above us. There was no mistaking that the stairs were creaking, and the clomp clomp was someone walking down the stairs. We shit ourselves and panicked and ran down the narrow staircase back to the cellar. In the panic, my friend dropped his lamp, and as it fell down the stairs, it came open, spilling oil, which ignited and caught the stairs alight. We did not even look back. We just wanted to get out of there. Scared shitless, the whole gang ran across the field. I forgot to mention, but this godforsaken place sat alone on the Thames at a disused dock and to the bus stop, which luckily had a bus already sitting there. When the bus pulled away, we went to the top deck and looked back at the hotel. Smoke was bellowing from it. We all went home and spent the night terrified that the police would knock on the door, as it was a listed building with historical value. The next day, we decided to go back to see what damage we had caused and if it was even still standing. To our astonishment, it was as it was. Those stairs were on fire. The place was majority wood, over 100 years old, with rubbish everywhere. It should have burnt down. I am 54 years old now, and this is the only thing that has ever happened to me that might convince me of the paranormal. We searched that place top to bottom, and there was no one in there. The hotel is now renovated and open. One day, I think I should book a room on the 3rd floor. When I was 5 years old, my family moved to a house, and I did not like it. They said that I hated it from the moment that I saw it. Like a fervent, fearful hatred of it. The moment my eyes noticed it, I hated it. I never understood why I hated it instantly. But I do remember begging them not to move there. Begging them not to make me sleep alone in what was to be my new bedroom. Begging for us to move again as soon as possible to any other house because this one was bad. Sometimes, if I was naughty, I would be put in timeout. I didn't mind being in timeout. It was peaceful, and it meant that no one was yelling at me anymore. But sometimes, they would decide that I had to spend time out alone in my room, and I would absolutely freak out and beg them not to make me, because of the wolves, is apparently what I said. I would hear howling, growling, sniffing, and scratching. That's something that I do remember. It sounded like it was coming from all of the rooms upstairs at once, but never in the exact room that I was in. Sometimes, I would try and sneak back down the stairs, about halfway down, just so I could run to my parents in the living room before the wolves got to me, if they came out. I would spend the entire time out just staring at the top of the stairs, waiting for the wolves to come and get me, frozen in abject horror, but ready to run if I needed to. The kitchen had one window, over the sink, looking out over the back garden, which was just an empty square garden with an old creepy shed on one side and a forest at the back end. My mom has since told me that this forest was just a thin line of trees separating the back gardens of our street and the next street over, but in my memory, it's still a thick impenetrable forest that went on forever. So, one evening in winter, my parents and I are all home, watching TV in the living room, and I go to get a drink from the kitchen. I get a cup and turn to the sink, but then I see in the kitchen window, clear as day, a grey-skinned old man. He was bald. He had this melancholy, motionless expression on his face. He was wearing a tan-colored long coat with a big collar, like a smart shirt would have. The collar is unfolded and tipped up, like you might do if it was windy or raining, which it wasn't. I was frozen in fear. I tried to scream, but it came out like a whisper. This went on for what felt like forever, but was probably just a minute in total. The sad old man staring back at me, inches away from the window, lit up only by the kitchen light. Me, motionless in the middle of the kitchen, staring back at him, repeatedly whisper screaming. Eventually, I managed to get my voice and shout for my mom, still staring at the man, him still staring at me. She comes into the kitchen, and as she does, he just fades away. Not backing away from the window, still motionless. It looked like he slowly just backed away and became invisible. She could see that I was distressed, asked me what was wrong, and I just kept saying, "There's a man in the window, he's staring at me." So my dad comes into the kitchen too, and he picks me up. shows me my reflection in the window and tries to say that I probably just saw that, but I was not having it. I would not have been able to see my own reflection because I was too short for that angle to make sense. The window was above the sink. I was shorter than the sink. He had to pick me up for me to see my own reflection in the window. I just kept repeating that he was outside. He was right there at the window. He looked sad. He was staring at me. My dad went outside to check, but he found no one. Then he came back, and they spent the rest of the evening trying to calm me down. Cut to years later, and I'm recounting the story for my friends with my mom there, and she was shocked that I still had all of the details of the man's appearance in my head, the details of how it all went down. She didn't know about the whisper screaming that felt like it lasted a lifetime, because I never brought it up at the time. My mom then remembered all of the other things I hated about the house, asked if I remembered the walls, and I said yes. Then she tells me that they got a good deal on the house. They bought it from a friend who was selling it, because it was her parents' house, but her mom died unexpectedly from a quick illness, and her dad later took his own life in the shed. The daughter just wanted rid of that house ASAP, and my parents were looking at the right time. So one of them died upstairs, and the other one died in the shed. I felt haunted upstairs, and the shed was in the back garden where I saw the sad old man. I do remember that we only lived there less than a year, and that event in the kitchen must have affected my parents' view of the house, because when we did move, they asked me many times while we were viewing houses what I thought about it. Was it a bad house? They picked the house that they still live in today because it was the only house that still 5-year-old me said felt good. I will chime in because I have 2 stories. I am a rural sheriff's deputy in the middle of the Appalachian Mountains. We have had 2 of us who patrolled almost 500 miles of road, and it was not uncommon for weird stuff to happen. These are the ones that I still cannot explain. On patrol one night at around 2 a.m., I'm going down a pitch black country road. There is not even the moon out, and I'm traveling about 60-ish miles an hour, and I come to a set of small rolling hills. I go down the first hill, back up, back down, and as I get to the bottom of the rolling hill, there is a person right in front of my car. It looked like an old woman in a white gown. I know it sounds like every scary movie ever, but this is what happened, and I knew I was going to hit her. I locked up the brakes, and she was dead center of my cruiser, about 10 to 15 feet out. I braced for impact, and I guess I locked up the brakes so hard in that old Crown Vic that the car fishtailed at the last minute. She passed right beside my door and window. I could have reached out and grabbed her. That is how close she was. Of course, it all happened so fast it was a blur. No features on the person. I stop. Thank God I didn't kill some poor old woman who wandered out of her house, and you guessed it, she was gone. And to top it off, this was right next to an old church and cemetery. I looked and yelled and never saw the woman again. Eventually I got creeped out and just left. I have no idea what the hell happened. There are no houses within miles of this church and cemetery. Second story. It's either a few years later or maybe a little bit before. I can't remember at this point because it was decades ago. I'm on the same part of the county, not that far away actually, just a few miles down that exact same road. It's a similar time of night. I'm on patrol, and I am coming up to a giant stretch of the road that contained a 4-way intersection. I see headlights approaching me, and I slow down and come to a stop at the intersection. I realize after a few seconds, the headlights are just sitting in the roadway, about 100 to 150 yards away. Strange, but not the weirdest thing ever. It could be someone who is drunk. I start driving up to see what's happening, and the headlights go out. So I stop for a second and wonder what the hell is going on. The lights come back on. I sit there for a second, and both lights elevate about 10 to 12 feet off the ground, and then come together to form a single bright light. At this point, I am starting to feel my skin crawl. The light immediately goes out. I turn all of my lights on and go down the road and try to figure out what it is that I just saw. I came across nothing. No cars, no farming equipment, nothing. There's no way whatever was in that road could have gotten around me or turned around and left without me seeing them. To this day, I have no clue what those lights were. So, this happened when I was probably 12 years old. I was shooting hoops and practicing dribbling by myself at gym class. I remember that nothing out of the ordinary was going on. I just remember shooting hoops and dribbling alone, while the other kids did all their own thing. The gym teacher was a hands-off kind of lady. Let the kids do whatever they wanted, really. Gym ends and lunch is next. I'm taken aside by my homeroom teacher while going to the cafeteria. She gives me a tray of food and tells me that I am not eating at the cafeteria. I ask why. She says something along the lines of, "For what you did at gym class." I don't inquire further because I'm much too hungry. Until the end of the day, I was in the principal's office. I was told that I took a kid's finger and bent it in the complete opposite direction it was supposed to go. I remember hearing from my dad at the end of the day that the kid was in the hospital. I responded by saying it was an accident because I was in shock and thought that denying it would get me in even more trouble because they would think I was lying. I have no idea whether I was framed or whether something neurological happened to me. One kid that I trusted told me that he saw me do it. Years later, I confided in my mom about how I don't remember doing any of it, and she said it might have been the Adderall I was taking at the time. Has anyone else experienced this phenomenon? I remember periodically I would black out, is what I would call it. When there are short periods of time when I do things that I don't remember doing. This next one happened when I was 15. I was coming home from school one day with my parents. The entryway required you to walk through the kitchen to get to the living room. I walked by the fridge, which had a small lamp on top of it. I hear my parents yell, "What the hell, Anon?" I turn around. The lamp is on the ground, with the lampshade beaten in. I don't remember any of it, and my parents do not believe me. Years later, I am now 19, and I have a really shitty job. I'm chilling cause it's quiet all day at my job. My coworker asked me if I'm okay. I'm like, yeah, what the hell, why? He asked why I just shouted no while refilling magazines. I'm like, what the hell? I have not said anything for the past hour, and I have not been refilling magazines. My dad drove a truck between Edinburgh and London, and he tells me this story pretty often. He was driving down the motorway and looked to his right. He said he saw a woman with a mistrunchable bun, as he describes it, staring at him with a terrified expression from a car next to him. Before he really even knows how to react, the car pulls off at the next exit, and my dad, although shaken, carries on. About half an hour later, a different car with a different driver pulls up alongside my dad, with the same woman in the passenger seat, with the exact same expression on her face. My dad thinks, screw this, and plans to pull into the next services to report, as even if it's nothing or just a misunderstanding, it's better to be safe than sorry, right? Anyway, the car disappears before he can get any details, like plates, etc., and he thinks there is no point calling the police with no details, so he carries on driving. Literally about 4 hours later, almost in London, yet another car pulls alongside him with the same woman, with the same exact hair and the same terrified expression. Except, this time, she appears to be screaming at my dad through the window, so my dad pulls over into a lay-by and calls the police. Apparently, they have received 3 other calls about the same woman and car in the same area in the last few minutes. It is unfortunately anticlimactic, as he never heard anything more about it, but he did not see her again. And although he kept an eye on the news, he never saw anything about it. Hopefully it's just a giant coincidence, who knows. The repeating nature of this one reminds me of one weird story back when I was in high school. It was summer and my dad's birthday, so we drove to a casino 2 hours away to watch a boxing match with my uncle. It finishes, and we drive back the same night. We are nearing a canyon with no phone reception, so we call my mom and tell her that we will be home soon. The canyon usually takes about 30 minutes with no traffic. It's around midnight, so we enter the canyon and we are all pretty tired. To keep us talking and keep us awake, we start telling stories. Most of them are creepy stories. This goes on for a while, and it feels like time is passing in a haze. We pass this butte in the canyon, and suddenly I get deja vu. I'm convinced that we already passed that before. All of us have driven this canyon 100 times and know the way out. We keep talking, and then we pass the same butte again. This time I pointed out, and my dad and uncle noticed the time. It's 1 a.m. and we are still not home, so we all start to get a bit freaked out. We stop talking and just watch the road slowly pass by. Now that we're paying attention though, time seems to catch up. We exit the canyon around 1:15 a.m. and call my mom, who is freaked out that she had not heard from us. We still to this day have no idea where that extra 45 minutes or so went.